mother asked me when I would finally kick my daughter out of the house. And I lost it. I never thought I'd raise my voice to an 85-year-old woman, let alone my own mother. But after months of silent judgment, veiled comments, and emotional manipulation, I snapped, what she doesn't understand is that my daughter isn't some freeloader clinging to comfort. She's a lifeline, not just to herself, but to me and my disabled husband. We're not a burden to each other. We're surviving together. But maybe that's not what my mother wants. Maybe there's something more behind her question, something I've been afraid to admit. Did I go too far? Or did I finally say what needed to be said? I didn't mean to yell, but the words just slipped out of my mouth before I could stop them. My daughter isn't your problem, and her living here, that's none of your damn business. The silence that followed felt deafening. My mother blinked at me like I had just slapped her. Her lips quivered, and then the tears came. Slow at first, then full-blown sobs as she clutched her chest and said, "Why would you scream at me? I'm only concerned for your future. You're getting old too, you know." Old. She said that word like it was a curse, like aging was a disease that gave her license to control everything around her. But here's the thing, no one seems to grasp. I'm already stretched to my absolute limit. I'm 66, retired, yes, but barely resting. My days are divided between caring for my disabled husband, who needs help getting up, getting dressed, eating, and visiting my mother at her assisted living facility, where she has everything she could possibly need. Nurses, aides, delivery services, activities, companions. And yet she uses none of them. She waits for me. Only me. At first I thought she just missed me, that maybe, as she aged, she found comfort in my company. I let it slide when she refused to use the in-facility laundry service. I didn't argue when she asked me to shop for her instead of letting staff handle it. But then came the lists. Pages of errands, specific brands, demands at odd hours, guilt trips whenever I said I was tired. And now, this. Her concern for my daughter's living situation. Let me tell you about C. My daughter is 29. She's quiet, a bit anxious, but strong in ways people don't always see. She works a full-time job. Not glamorous, not high-paying, but she's never missed a rent contribution. Never failed to pay her share of utilities or groceries. She cooks every weekend. She scrubs the bathroom when I forget. She notices when I look drained and tells me to sit down while she folds the laundry. She buys little snacks she knows I like, even when I tell her to save her money. She is not a burden. She is my partner in this tired little ship of ours. What my mother doesn't understand or refuses to see is that we're not coddling C. We need each other. This economy, it's brutal. C couldn't afford a decent place on her own. And frankly, neither could my husband and I. We're not some happy suburban family playing house. We're survivors. Linked by blood, yes, but more importantly, by necessity and respect. So when my mother looked me in the eye and said, "Isn't it time you finally made her move out and live her own life?" I saw red, because that question didn't come from concern. It came from entitlement, from the kind of manipulation only someone with decades of control under their belt knows how to execute. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't about C at all. Maybe my mother was laying the groundwork. Maybe she wants me to clear space so she can move in with us. Maybe she's tired of nurses who don't cater to her emotional whims. Maybe she wants to rule my house the same way she tries to rule my time. And here's what keeps me up at night. What if she already said something to C? What if, behind my back, she's whispered little guilt-laced daggers into my daughter's ear? Don't you think you've overstayed your welcome? Because lately, C has been quieter, a little distant. She's been tiptoeing, asking more than usual, apologizing for things that don't need apologies. And that's what really broke me. Not the question, not the tears, but the realization that my mother might have planted seeds of shame in my daughter, the one person in this house who gives more than she takes. So yes, I snapped, and no, I'm not sorry, because some things need to be said. And maybe, for once, she needed to hear the truth, even if it shattered her version of control. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying it in my head, the look on my mother's face, the way her voice trembled when she said she was just concerned, and worst of all, the silence that followed when I walked out of that room. Not angry, not even sorry. Just done. But even after the door had shut behind me, her words clung to me like smoke. Kick her out. As if C were some kind of stray we'd let in. As if kindness had an expiration date. When I got home, the house was dimly lit. One kitchen light on, the soft hum of the fridge, and the faint scent of lavender which C always sprayed before bed. I found her sitting on the couch, knees drawn to her chest, the TV remote untouched beside her. She looked up and gave me a small smile. Not a happy one, more like she was trying to look fine, for my sake. That was the moment I knew something had changed. "Hey," she said. "Did Grandma ask about me again?" My heart sank. She already knew. I sat down next to her. "What did she say to you, C?" She hesitated. "Nothing too bad. Just that I'm almost 30 and still living at home. That maybe you're too polite to say it, but I'm probably in the way." There it was. The poison I had feared had already been injected. She said maybe I don't have my life together, C added quietly, that I'm dragging you down, that I should want more. I felt heat rising in my chest again. This wasn't just casual meddling. This was emotional sabotage, quiet, calculated, cruel. "Listen to me," I said firmly. "You are not dragging me down. You hold this house together more than you realize." C blinked at me. I could see the conflict in her eyes, wanting to believe me, but also carrying years of quiet shame about not being enough. We rarely talked about it, but I knew she struggled. Anxiety, burnout, panic attacks that came out of nowhere and knocked her down for days. And yet, she always got up, always showed up. For her job, for me, for her dad. And here was my mother, swooping in like some prophet of disappointment, chipping away at my daughter's confidence for the sake of control. "You know," C said after a moment, "I've been thinking maybe I should try to get my own place, even if it's just a small studio. I don't want to be a burden." "No," I said, more forcefully than I intended. "Don't let her get in your head." "But, no." I took her hand. "You live here because we're family, because we choose to do life together, not because you owe anyone an explanation, least of all someone who hasn't lifted a finger in years, but still acts like she runs the world." For a long moment, we sat there in silence. Then she whispered, "Do you think she wants to move in here?" The question sent a chill down my spine. I had wondered the same thing. If my mother could chase C out, if she could convince me that C was the problem, maybe she thought she could move in, plant herself in that same room, and take over the last bit of my life I still had control over. And maybe that's why she had always kept me on edge, dangling guilt like a carrot, making me feel like I owed her more than I had to give. But now I had something she didn't. Clarity. For the first time in years, I saw the full picture. The way she played the victim, the way she rewrote every act of help as obligation, the way she turned concern into commands. And I wasn't going to let her do that to my daughter. Not now. Not ever. The days that followed were different. Not in any explosive or dramatic way, but in the way that quiet tension slips into a room and refuses to leave. Like an unspoken weight hanging in the air. C started waking up earlier, slipping out before I even had my morning tea ready. She said it was to get a head start on work, but I knew better. She was pulling back, guarding herself, and I hated it. I tried to fix it, making her favorite soup, folding her laundry before she could, even writing her a little note on a Post-it like I used to when she was in high school. "You are not a burden. You are my daughter, my teammate, my heart." She smiled when she found it, tucked it into her wallet, but something had still shifted. And I could feel that shift in every careful word, every hesitated gesture. The seed had been planted. One evening, I found her on the back porch. She was staring out at the yard, knees hugged to her chest, hoodie pulled up like a shield. "Grandma called me today," she said quietly. "She left a voicemail." I clenched the railing, bracing for it. She said she didn't mean to upset me, that she's just afraid I'm wasting my best years playing house with my aging parents, that she didn't mean to call me a burden, just a misplaced priority. A misplaced priority, like C's entire existence was some inconvenient sidebar in my life. "She said maybe she should come live with us," C continued, her voice barely above a whisper. that it would give you more purpose, more stability. And there it was, the confirmation I'd been dreading. It wasn't about C's future, it was about my mother's. She was making her move. I could feel the anger rising again, but I didn't let it boil over this time. I sat down beside C, took a breath, and asked the question that had been burning inside me for days. "Do you want to move out?" She was quiet for a long time. Then, without looking at me, she said, "I don't know. Part of me does. Because I feel like I'm standing in the way of your peace. But another part, the stronger part, wants to stay. Because I know how much we rely on each other. And I don't want to leave you to deal with her alone." My heart broke a little, not because she didn't want to go, but because she felt responsible for me when she should just be allowed to be, to exist, to breathe, to heal. I reached over, gently turning her face toward mine. "You are not standing in the way of anything. You are my peace. You're the reason I haven't crumbled." She nodded slowly, eyes glassy. "I just don't want to be the reason she moves in," she said. And that's when I realized C wasn't afraid of living here. She was afraid of being used as a pawn, afraid that the same emotional pressure I had endured for years was now creeping into her world, that every loving gesture might be interpreted as leverage, that no matter how much she gave, it would never be enough for someone like my mother, someone who equates control with love. I had spent decades excusing my mother's behavior, but now it was starting to corrode the one relationship I valued most. So I made a decision. "She's not moving in," I said firmly, "and I'm going to make that clear, to her and to myself." C looked at me, not with doubt, but with relief, like she'd been holding her breath for days and could finally exhale. That night, I opened my laptop and wrote an email, short, sharp, and direct. "Mom, I love you, but C is not leaving this house. You are not moving in. Please stop." I didn't hit send right away, but for the first time, I realized something. Saying no to my mother wasn't cruelty. It was protection. For me, and for the daughter who never asked for this war. I didn't send the email, not that night, not the next morning. Instead, I drove, straight to the assisted living facility, fingers clenched around the steering wheel like I was bracing for impact. And in a way, I was. Because this wasn't going to be one of our usual visits. The kind where she pretends to be frail, and I pretend to believe it. No, this was the day the pretending stopped. I found her sitting in the common lounge, a cup of untouched tea in front of her, watching a rerun of some old black and white drama she probably didn't even like. She looked up, surprised, maybe even a little guilty. "You didn't call first," she said. Not a greeting, a warning. "I didn't come to chat," I replied. There was a pause. I sat down across from her, calmly, firmly, and then I said it. "You are not moving in with us. That's final." Her face froze. She blinked, once, twice, then tilted her head slightly like she hadn't heard me right. "What brought this on?" she asked, feigning innocence. "You know exactly what. You've been planting doubts in C's head. You've made her feel like she's unwanted, like she's some obstacle between you and me. And I won't let that continue." She scoffed. "I was just trying to help. I thought maybe you needed a change, a little more peace, a little more space to breathe." I stared at her, stunned by the hypocrisy. "Peace?" I repeated. "You think pushing my daughter out of her home would bring me peace?" She leaned forward, voice tightening. "She's holding you back, and you know it. A woman her age should be standing on her own 2 feet, not hiding behind her mother's roof. She's not a child anymore." "And you are," I snapped, the edge finally breaking through. "Because for someone who insists she's only concerned, you sure act like a child, demanding, manipulating, refusing help from actual professionals just so I can be at your beck and call." She flinched. That struck a nerve. "I've spent years bending my life around your needs," I continued, "but now you're trying to bend my daughter's too. You want her out because you want in. But this home, my home, isn't a reward for your control. It's not your backup plan." Her lip curled slightly. "You sound just like your father when he walked out." I froze. She'd never mentioned that night before. The night he packed his bags and disappeared. The night she claimed he abandoned us out of selfishness. But now, I heard something different in her voice. A hint of bitterness, of loss, of defeat. And suddenly, everything clicked. She hadn't just been trying to move in. She had been trying to replace something she lost decades ago. Control, power, a house where she could dictate every breath, every rule, every relationship. She wasn't concerned. She was lonely and dangerous in her loneliness. I stood up, heart pounding. "I love you," I said quietly, "but your loneliness doesn't get to dismantle what I've built with C. You don't get to break her spirit just to fill your own void." She didn't respond. She just looked down at her tea, hands trembling ever so slightly. I turned to leave, but before I did, I said one last thing. "You lost Dad by trying to control him. You're about to lose me too, if you keep going down this path." And then I walked away. I didn't cry. I didn't second guess. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting as a daughter. I was protecting my daughter. And I realized something else on that drive home. Sometimes the hardest boundary to draw is the one between loyalty and self-preservation. When I got home that afternoon, C was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, chopping vegetables like she was trying to outrun her own thoughts. She looked up as I walked in, her eyes immediately scanning my face for a sign of peace or of war. "She knows," I said simply. C stopped mid-chop. I sat down at the table, letting the silence settle between us like dust. Then I looked at her and said something I hadn't said in years, something I'd forgotten I even needed to say. "You are safe here. With me, always." She didn't cry, not at first, but she set down the knife, walked over, and buried her face in my shoulder, like she was 5 again and the thunder had gotten too loud. And I held her, not just like a mother, but like a comrade, like someone who had stood in the same storm. For the first time in what felt like months, I slept through the night. The next few weeks weren't perfect. My mother didn't call, but she didn't stop me from visiting either. Our conversations were civil but distant. There was no apology. Not that I expected one, but there was a shift, a hesitation in her tone, a pause before each request, maybe even a tinge of guilt. And that was enough, because I wasn't looking for her to change anymore. I was changing. One evening, C and I sat in the living room watching some old comedy rerun neither of us really cared about. The air was light, peaceful. Then she turned to me and said, "I've been thinking about going back to school. Maybe finish my degree." I blinked. It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it. With conviction, with hope, with that little fire I thought my mother had snuffed out completely. "You should," I said without hesitation, "and whatever you need, we'll figure it out together." She smiled, and for the first time in a long time, I saw her as she once was. Not the fragile girl I needed to protect, but a woman choosing to build something new for herself. That night, I realized what real generational strength looks like. It's not sacrifice without limits. It's not control disguised as love. It's the courage to break cycles, to draw lines, to protect peace, even when it means disappointing the people who raised us. A few days later, I received a letter from the assisted living facility. Not from my mother, from the head nurse. Apparently, my mother had finally started using the grocery delivery service. She was also attending the Wednesday movie nights, even asking about yoga classes. I smiled, not because she was fixed, but because maybe, just maybe, by losing control, she found a bit of freedom too. That weekend, C and I redecorated the spare bedroom. Not because we needed the space, but because it felt symbolic. A fresh coat of paint, new curtains, a plant on the windowsill. It was no longer a room waiting for someone else to fill it. It was ours again. And as we laughed over the crooked picture frame we hung, C said something I'll never forget. "Thank you for choosing me, Mom." I didn't respond right away. I just hugged her. Because in a world where so many parents guilt their children for staying and others shame them for leaving, I wanted her to know this truth. Love isn't measured by independence. It's measured by presence, respect, and the space we give each other to simply be. And for the first time in a very long time, we both finally had that space.